Let us pray. Almighty God, the creator and ruler of heaven and earth, we beseech thee to inspire and guide all our actions, so that we may always walk in the path of justice, love, and charity to one another. Help us with thy grace to do only those things that will promote the unity, peace, happiness, and prosperity of Nigeria in general and Lagos State in particular. Amen. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. You are all welcome to today's sitting. Let us go through the votes and proceedings of Thursday, 4th of April, 2019. Ojú ìwé ẹ̀rìnlélógójì lé lẹ́ẹ̀ẹ́dẹ́gbẹ̀rin. Ojú ìwé àrùnlélógójì lé lẹ́ẹ̀ẹ́dẹ́gbẹ̀rin. Ojú ìwé ẹ̀rìndínláàádọ́ta lé lẹ́ẹ̀ẹ́dẹ́gbẹ̀rin. I have examined the votes and proceedings of Thursday, 4th August 2019, and approval is here granted. Mr. Clark, any message from the governor?
Right, Honorable Speaker, distinguished honorable members, There is no message from the
Any
government.
other announcements?
Mr. Speaker, sir, there is no announcement.
Petition?
None, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Matter of urgent public importance? None. Personal explanation? None. Reports? None. Majority Leader?
Right, Honorable Speaker. Next on the other paper for today is business of the day. And in respect of that, we have presentation of reports in respect of Domestic Staff Service Provider Registration Bill 2018. Mr. Speaker, to be able to accomplish this, may I humbly move that this House dissolve to Committee of the Whole. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Lulado?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I second the motion as moved.
All in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Honorable Tunde Brimo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Distinguished colleagues, this is a report of the Ad hoc Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights, Public Petitions, and LSHA on a bill for a law to provide for the registration of domestic staff service providers in Lagos State and for connected purposes. The House, at its plenary session of Monday, 30th April 2018, mandated the Ad hoc Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights, Public Petitions, and LSHA to further look into the above-mentioned bill and report its findings. Following Order 73 of the Business Rules and Standing Orders of the House, which mandates every committee to which a bill has been committed to ensure public participation during the consideration of same, the Ad hoc Committee organized a public hearing on Thursday, the 10th of May 2018, at the Latif Dakon Auditorium to seek input from stakeholders on the proposed law. Mr. Speaker, with your kind permission, may I move to page 6, item 7, observations, sir. Item 7, observations, sir.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 7.0, observations. Though the enthusiasm that greeted the introduction of the bill was very high, participants, however, prayed the House to consider the following major suggestions and observations in the process of its passage into law. 1, it was observed that the interpretation section of the bill was section 17 instead of section 1, as it is the drafting style of the Lagos State House of Assembly. 2, the section 1 of the bill, which is an establishment clause, was modeled up with a corporate capacity clause. 3, that there is no need for the registry to be a corporate entity. 4, that there is no express provision prohibiting the use of children as domestic staff. 5, that there is no specific provision for conditions of employing non-Nigerians as domestic staff. 6, that the bill is not all-encompassing to properly capture the intent of the bill. Hence, the need to expand existing sections and create additional sections to properly capture the essence of the bill. And 7, that the offenses and penalties were not spelled out and there are no terms and conditions to such sanctions. 9.0, recommendations. Thus, based on the above recommendations, observations, the committee recommends as follows. 1, move section 17 with a side note interpretation to section 1, then renumber accordingly. Delete the word Attorney General in the interpretation section and replace Commissioner and draft to read, Commissioner means the Commissioner for Youth and Social Development in the state or a member of the State Executive Council for the time being charged with the responsibility of the Ministry of Youth and Social Development in the state. 2, old section 1 with the side note establishment of the Lagos State Domestic Staff Service Provider Registry is now section 2 and it is amended in lines 2 to 3 by deleting the phrase which shall be a body corporate with perpetual succession and the common sale and may sue and be sued in its corporate name. This is because the service provider registry is not a juristic person. It is a state policy. 3. Section 2, now Section 3, creates new paragraph C and E to read: C, monitor and control the activities of domestic staff service providers in the state. E, sanction those who unlawfully engage in the activities of providing domestic staff services. 4. Section 3, now Section 4, with the side note, functions of the registry, create new paragraphs G, H, I, J, K, L, and M to read: G, ensure that internal employers of domestic staff have access to relevant information about domestic staff service providers operating in the state. H, ensure that the child protection agencies, local authorities, and the law enforcement agencies have access to vital information relating to domestic staff registered by the registry in the state when required. I, enforce and sanction all unlawful and fraudulent activities of domestic staff and domestic staff service providers in the state. J, facilitate the settlement of dispute through conciliation. K, renewal of registration certificate. L, disseminate information and carry out enlightenment campaign. And M, train and impart skills to domestic workers. 5. Create a new Section 10 with side note: renewal of registration certificate to read: 1. A registration certificate shall be renewed at an interval of 1 year on the payment of fees as may be prescribed. 2. The registry shall maintain such registers and records giving such particulars of domestic workers employed, the nature of work performed by the domestic worker, and such other particulars in such form as may be prescribed. 6. Create a new Section 8 with the side note: application for registration to read: an application for the grant of a certificate shall be in writing and addressed to the registrar in such terms and manners as may be prescribed. 7. Section 7, now Section 9, create a new subsection 2 to read: the ministry shall prescribe the amount to be paid as fees or charges for registration under this law. 8. Create a new Section 12 with the side note: revocation of certificate of registration to read: 1. The registry may revoke certificate of registration by a notice in writing to the person holding the certificate. 2. The registry may revoke a certificate of registration where it has reason to believe that the holder of a certificate has concealed any information or willfully suppressed any fact. 3. The revocation of certificate of registration under this section shall have effect from the date specified in the notice. 9. Section 8, now Section 12, deletes subsection 3, 4, and 5 as these subsections have been incorporated in Section 7. 10. Create a new Section 16 with a side note to read: operation of domestic staff provider without registration. Operation of domestic staff provider. 15.1. A domestic staff service provider shall not carry on the business of engaging domestic staff for employment in the state without registration, unless it has been duly registered in accordance with the provisions of this law. 2. A domestic staff service provider that contravenes the provision of this section shall be liable to a fine of not less than 500,000 naira. 3. A domestic staff service provider that misrepresents any information or willfully suppresses any material fact shall be liable to a fine of not less than 500,000 naira or 1 year community service. 11. Create a new Section 19 with a side note to read: establishment of domestic staff complaint desk. 1. The registrar shall establish a domestic staff complaint desk referred to in this law as a complaint desk. 2. The complaint desk shall receive and cause all reports relating to abuse or violation of rights under this law or any other enactment to be duly investigated. 12. Section 10, now 18, with a side note: searches of register, is redrafted to read: side note, searches of register. 1. This registrar or an authorized official shall at all reasonable times conduct searches into the register of domestic staff in the employment of any domestic staff service provider. 2, a person who intends to engage the services of domestic staff service provider or domestic staff may, upon paying the prescribed fee, apply to the registrar to conduct a search of the register maintained by the registry. 3, upon conducting search as provided under Section 2, the registrar shall issue a certified true copy of the information requested to the applicant. 4, where the search is of a general nature, for purpose of obtaining information that will assist the applicant in engaging a domestic staff provider or domestic staff, the registrar may issue a certified true copy of such information as may be deemed necessary. 13, create a new Section 18 with a side note, register of offenders, to read, the registry shall keep records of domestic staff offenders. 14, Section 11, now Section 19, create a new subsection 2D to read 19.2D, medical records of all domestic staff in the employment of registered domestic service staff service providers. 15, Section 13, now 20, with the side note, inspectors and staff of the registry. Create new subsection 2 and 3 to read 2. The routine inspection referred to in subsection 1 of this section shall be conducted within the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. on any day except Sundays. 3, notwithstanding the provisions of this section, the inspector shall, in conjunction with the relevant child protection agencies, local authorities, and law enforcement agents, enter into any premises upon receipt of complaints or reasonable belief that a domestic staff has been subjected to any form of abuse which discloses to the Commission any cognizable offense for the purpose of rescuing the domestic staff. 16, create a new Section 22 with a side note, obstruction of duly authorized inspectors. 22, a person who obstructs the registry or any of its officials from carrying out its functions under the provisions of this law commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine of 100,000 naira or 1 month imprisonment or both. 17, create a new Section 23 with the side note, prohibition of employment of a child as follows. No child shall be employed as a domestic worker or for such incidental or ancillary work which is of a child, prohibited under any law for the time being in force. 18, create a new Section 24 with side note, rules of employment, to read rules of employment. 1, a person under the age of 18 shall not be employed as a domestic staff by a domestic staff service provider or any individual in the state. 19, create a new Section 25 with a side note, employment of non-Nigerians domestic staff, to read 1, domestic staff service providers, registered individuals or any individual body must ensure that non-Nigerians seeking employment as domestic staff in the state must have, sub A, been cleared through Nigerian Immigration Services and must have obtained visa and work permit. B, undergone complete medical examinations and have been certified medically fit. And C, being registered with the Lagos State Residence Registration Agency. 2, a person that contravenes the provisions of this section commits an offense and shall be liable on conviction to a fine not less than A, 300,000 naira or imprisonment for a term of not less than 6 months or both for an individual. B, 2 million naira for corporate bodies. 20, create a new Section 26 with a side note, offenses and penalties as follows. Offenses and penalties, 26.1, a service provider who contravenes the provision of this law or any rule made shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 months and with fine which may extend to 200,000 naira or with both, and in the case of a continuing contravention with an additional fine which may extend to 1,000 naira for every day during which such contravention continues after conviction for the first contravention. 2, if a person who has been convicted of an offense punishable under subsection 1 is again guilty of an offense involving a contravention or failure of compliance of the same provision, it shall be punishable on a subsequent conviction with imprisonment for a time which may extend to 6 months and with fine which shall not be less than 20,000 naira or both. 3. Where an employer fails to comply with the provisions of this law, the employer shall be punishable with a fine of 100,000 naira. 4. A person who willfully obstructs an officer so authorized by the registry to conduct inspection under this law or refuses or willfully neglects to afford the officer a reasonable facility for making an inspection, examination, inquiry, or investigation authorized by or under this law in relation to the employer or a service provider to whom this law applies, shall be punishable with an imprisonment for a term of 3 months and with fine of not less than 200,000 naira or both. 5. Whoever willfully refuses to produce on demand of such an inspecting officer or a person so authorized by the registry any register or other document kept in pursuance of this law, or prevents or attempts to prevent or does anything which he has reason to believe is likely to prevent any person from appearing before or being examined by an inspecting person acting in pursuance of his duties under this law, shall be liable on conviction to a term not exceeding 3 months community service or a fine of 100,000 naira or both. 6. A person who knowingly sends, directs, or takes any person to any place for immoral purposes or to a place where she is likely to be morally corrupted. 2. In any manner sexually exploit such a person or child. Or 3. Makes available young children as domestic workers, shall be liable on conviction to a term of imprisonment for not less than 3 years and may extend up to a term of imprisonment of 7 years or a fine of 500,000 naira or both. 21. Create a new section 27 with a side note, effect of inconsistency with the law. 27.1. Effect of inconsistency with the law. The provision of this law shall have effect notwithstanding anything inconsistent contained in the terms of any agreement or contract of service, whether made before or after the commencement of this law. 2. Nothing contained in this law shall be construed as precluding any worker from entering into an agreement with the principal employer, as the case may be, for granting them rights or privileges in respect of any matter which are more favorable to them than those which they would have be entitled to under this law. 22. Create a new section 24 with the side note, domestic staff service providers to be liable for an act of domestic staff. To read, domestic staff service provider, registered individual employer, shall be liable for any fraudulent act of a domestic staff under their employment. 23. Renumber all sections accordingly. Mr. Speaker, the committee expresses its gratitude to you, sir, and all members, distinguished members of the House of Assembly, for the opportunity given to us to carry out this assignment. We also appreciate the clerk of the House and the Secretariat for their support in ensuring the timely completion of this report. Thank you, sir.
Part of your immediate past chairman who put everything, you will recognize her.
Yes, sir. The committee expressed gratitude to the immediate past chairman of the Committee on Human Rights, Judiciary, Public Petition, LSHA, Honorable Mrs. Adefumila Otejosho, who midwife this bill to this extent and who actually authored this report. Thank you very much, distinguished Honorable Mrs. Fumilayo Tediosho. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, too. You are most welcome. Who has the light? Honorable Abiru. Okay, you put it off. Honorable Olua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby move that the report should be adopted for debate.
Thank you, sir. Who is seconding? Honorable Rahim.
To second the motion as moved.
All in favor, say ayes. Those against, nay. The ayes have it. Honorable Olulade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman,
Sorry, do you put on glasses?
you should understand, sir. Mr.
I don't
Speaker.
understand anything. I'm just asking because I think you have a different face. This
Yes, sir.
What happened?
Is this same thing, sir?
Safety.
Yes, sir. That we discussed earlier, sir.
I can't remember, but continue. Agbalo. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Speaker, honorable colleagues, good afternoon. The chairman, I must also commend, I think, Honorable Mrs. Adefunlayo Tejoso was the one who presided.
Well, but she's not the chairman. You refer to the chairman.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. I just want to find out, sir, that
you-
in page 10,
You ask the chairman.
page 10, there was an exception of Sundays that I find it very unacceptable if a day is being accepted from the
What?
inspectors. I think that is 15, recommendation 15, subsection 2 and 3. To number 2 said that the routine inspection referred to in subsection 1 of this section shall be conducted within the hours of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on any day except Sunday. And I'm curious to know why the exception. Thank you.
Okay, that is. They should include Sunday.
I think any day the inspector can come into the house to inspect. The crime might be committed on a Sunday. So why do we have to exempt Sunday from it?
In fact, considering the nature of this bill, I think Sunday should be included. In fact, you can take away Monday and add Sunday because it's on Saturday, Sunday that you meet a lot of people at home. So when you look at this bill and the intent behind it, so Sunday should not be excluded. Honorable Olu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague, good afternoon. I must commend the committee for a job well done. And obviously, we can ask for a better bill now. Because when we look at what is happening all over, a lot of people are vulnerable to their domestic staff. People have been killed. Many of them have been actually had it very hard. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, I looked at some of the observations of the stakeholders, and the bill supposed to as well cover the rights of the domestic staff and access to redress in case if there is any abuse. Just like when we were talking about child right law, is very holistic. But when you look at this, bulk of what they were preaching for, what this is canvassing is basically has to do with the provider. So the title should be rechristened to accommodate the rights of the domestic staff. And number 2, sir, this decentralization of the registry. We know that for only one centralized registry, it will not allow for effectiveness of the bill. I expect it to be localized. Let there be all these registry at our local government areas and LCDA for effectiveness. Ditto the inspectors. The inspectors too should be localized and on a periodic period, maybe monthly or quarterly or every 3 months. They cannot upload to the central database. That is what I think I need to add, sir. Thank you.
Honorable Agubiade.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to call our attention to page 8 of the report, in respect of recommendation number 9, talking about section 8, which by renumbering is recommended as section 12. Mr. Speaker, what I'm seeing here is a double condition which amounts to tautology if we retain it in the law. Mr. Speaker, it reads, with your kind permission, a domestic staff service provider shall not carry on the business of engaging domestic staff for employment in the state without registration, and goes ahead to say, unless he has been duly registered in accordance with the provision of this law. I think the two cannot go together. We either drop one or take one. Is that we want to say cannot carry out the job without registration, or unless he has been duly registered in accordance with the provision of this law. And I think that elegance of drafting should go in favor of unless he has been duly registered in accordance with the provision of this law, while we strike out without registration. But the two conditions are presently in the provision.
Honorable Abiru.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I also wish to say that the points raised by Honorable Lowo, I indeed want to enforce on what he has said on those two major issues, the issue of decentralization and the right of, now beyond that, Mr. Speaker, there's also the issue of remuneration, which part of the submissions of those attended, actually advised that with the approval of the new minimum wage now, that it's just right and proper for us to ensure, since we want to make a law to regulate this activity, that the issue of their wages too should be considered in this law. Away from that, recommendation number 26, where that is on page 13, the effect of inconsistency with the law. I do not seem to be very clear what the chairman is trying to say here, because our attention has been drawn to the Child Act's right, and that we should consider the right of the child. Now, the effect of this section, I just want to be clear whether the new law intends to nullify any other existing law that is not consistent with the contents here, or what? What exactly do you mean by effect of inconsistency of the law? That will be from me, sir. Thank you very much.
Honorable Shah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to comment about page 11, recommendation 9, which states employment of non-Nigerian domestic staff. In the first section, it defines that a non-Nigerian seeking employment as domestic staff in the state must have one, which is A, get a visa, the medical report. And it went further in C to say that being registered with the Lagos State Resident Registration Agency, which is LSHA. If I recall, LSHA requires you to have lived somewhere for 6 months. I think the law allowing you to be registered as a resident of the state should be properly looked at. Also, Mr. Speaker, permit me, on page 13, which is recommendation 20, but on page 13, item 6, where it says a person who, one, knowingly sends, directs, or takes any person to any place for immoral purposes or to a place where she is likely to be morally corrupt. I think gender is something we agreed not to put in our laws, and it could be he, it could be she. So that needs some redrafting. That's my suggestion. Going further to same paragraph, or rather paragraph 2 of that, in any manner sexually exploits such person or a child. I think the child should be removed because we know there's a provision, recommendation earlier on that you cannot employ a child anyway. So that's already an offense, so we should not have it in that recommendation. Thank you very much.
Honorable Satonji.
Thank you, sir, the chairman. I am particular about recommendation 9, 10. That 10 is Roman figure X, 10. 15.1. A domestic staff service provider shall not carry on the business of engaging domestic staff for employment in the state. But instead of the state, let's wrote without registration state. I think there's an error there that needs to be corrected. Also on page 8, the last paragraph, also on 2, on page 9, it is recommended that a domestic staff provider that contravenes the provision of this section shall be liable to a fine of 500,000 naira. And 1 year imprisonment for the third one, whereas there's no imprisonment for the other one. I think we need to reconsider that. Lastly, on page 11, Roman figure 19. Roman figure 19, 2B. 2 million naira for corporate bodies, but it was recommended at 2A that 300,000 naira or imprisonment for a term of not less than 6 months. The corporate bodies, there should be an alternative to, if they are unable to pay the 2 million, what happens to them? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, can you please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the distinguished colleagues for picking up these observations on the report. Mr. Speaker, first, Honorable Lulade observed that why would we exempt Sundays in the recommendation? Mr. Speaker, I believe that that has been answered by the succeeding subsection of the proposed section 15. The succeeding subsection 3, page 10 now, page 10, item 15, under section 13, now section 20. When we read number 3, subsection 3, we will see that it says, notwithstanding the provision of this section, the inspectors shall, in conjunction with relevant child protection agencies, local authorities, and law enforcement agents, enter into any premises upon receipt of complaints or reasonable belief that a domestic staff has been subjected to any form of abuse which discloses to the Commission any cognizable offense for the purpose of rescuing the staff. That means they can go there at any time. But to make it clearer, we will work on it to adjust that, to make it very lucid. But it's been very full, but to make it as clear as possible, we will do something about that to make it more lucid, sir. Then Honorable Olowo queried though he commended the bill and he said domestic staff commit a lot of crimes, and this bill will, when it becomes a law, will help us to redress that. But that is true, sir. Then he now wondered why the register is not localized. Why is it so centralized? And if we look at page 8 of the report, sir, there is actually a proposal for us to, one of the comments made, page 6, item 8, it has been advised that we should decentralize the register and make it local government or local council development area based. So we are likely to look into that and incorporate that, sir. Also, sir, the majority leader talked about section recommendation on page 8, talked about recommendation 9. Recommendation 9. I want to say that that is an error. What is being read there was a side note that jumped owing to Prince's Devil into the actual section, subsection of the law. So it is side note that jumped into the subsection. So your fears have been addressed. What we said there was that a domestic staff service provider shall not carry on the business of engaging domestic staff for employment in the state unless it has been duly registered in accordance with the provisions of this law. Without registration was part of the side note, but Printer Devil made it to jump into the actual body of the law. We're sorry about that. Then the Chief Whip, Honorable Abiru, raised the same issues on the centralization of the law and went further to ask about wages, that why wouldn't we input the wages of the domestic staff in the law. Our position on this is that that's a labor matter which is under exclusive jurisdiction of the National Assembly, and we might not actually be able to fix minimum wage here. That's what we thought, but anyway, it can be subject to further discussion with the Chief Whip. Maybe we can educate ourselves better on that, but that's what we thought. The matter did come up, but that was what we thought. Then again, Honorable Abiru said, okay, we note his other comments. We note his other comments, and we are going to amend it accordingly. Then Honorable Shao made comments on page 13, item 6.1. That is a very patent error. That is very gender insensitive to have said she, because anybody is subject to molestation. Everybody is vulnerable to molestation. They molest male children too, or male individuals too. So we are going to amend that to be more gender encompassing. Thank you for that brilliant observation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I think about 2 questions raised were being left out in your explanation. Honorable Lowo talked about protecting the domestic staff. I think I read you have some provisions in this bill where it states that anybody that's abused or violates or harassed will be charged certain amounts or in prison. So, but the one raised by Honorable Abiru is very critical, because the genesis of abuse has to do with what you get at the end of the day. That is the wages. You have to do something about it. If it has been set at the federal level that minimum wage is 30,000 naira, we might not be able to place that 30,000 for domestic staff, but we should be able to look at something through your findings. You should be able to place something. You can't just leave it open, except we are thinking of having regulation attached to this law where you can state such things. But leaving it open, I think you have created room for exploitation. So those we are trying to, as we are, trying to stop the domestic staff from abusing their, what is it called, their guardians or the person that engaged them and their family. We must also protect them as well as what is due to them. So leaving it open is not, I don't think it's good enough.
I would do space, sir. We are just, we opine that we might not have the legislative competence to determine minimum wage payable to any category of workers.
Well, if you are trying to create regulation for the environment of operations, then you can't run away from the main key to that subject. If you are talking about my employment, condition of employment, the environment of employment, then you can't shy away from talking about my wages.
We look further into that, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So, you want to say something? You say what? Honorable Jimo? From there, you can move motion for the next motion, if you are willing. Who has the line? Honorable Ishao.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby move that the recommendations as amended be the resolution of the House.
Be adopted as resolution.
Adopted as the resolution of the House. Thank
Who
you.
is seconding? Honorable Naim.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby second the resolution as moved.
Those in favor say ayes. Those against nay. The ayes have it. Majority Leader. Sorry.
Well,
Chief Whip.
well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just wish to raise an observation here, sir.
Okay.
You know, in as much as I agree that the motion was raised, as a resolution of the House, as amended, I think what would have been most proper for us to do is to allow the committee, the motion has been carried, is to allow the committee to do the amendment, bring it back to the House before we adopt it as a resolution of the House, sir.
What amendments are you referring to that has not
all
been?
the issues that have been raised by members here today.
Okay, thank you very much. For
because he also agreed that they are going to look into it, and us giving an adoption is like giving a blanket assumption that we have adopted the report as. So I think it would have been much better for us to, for the committee to do the amendment, bring it back, and if we all now are in tandem, that is when we will give such.
Thank you, Honorable Abiru. But before you take your seat,
Yes, sir.
if we refuse to adopt it as we did, on what stage will they bring the reports again?
Well, we could allot a second day.
So at the second day, when they come back on the second allotted day,
Yes.
so what are we going to discuss on the reports?
He will take the report. We all will see that the amendment agreed upon today had been taken.
Thank you. Now, from the explanation made by the chairman after issues raised by members, so which one is left out from the question? Is there anyone left out that has not been answered or responded to?
Well, it is because I think it's a process of law. It is the process that I find, that I'm raising the observation on.
Okay, let us even agree that because at the third reading, do we have room to raise question or not?
We don't. We don't at the third reading.
We do. Check your rules. I'm sure you are quoting from the rules. When you are at the third reading stage, you can always, through notice, you can always raise, question for amendments. Check your rules.
Right Honorable, sir.
Ah.
With due respect, sir. The third reading of any bill is to dot the i's and cross
Thank
the
you very
t's.
much. I know. Thank you.
Not changing intendiment of the report.
Thank you for reminding me, but I want you to
Observation.
still go back to your rules to read. If there is room at the third reading to raise question or otherwise.
Well, I will have to check and
Observation.
to you, sir. But I don't think so, sir.
Before observation, at the third, there is no stage of bill process that you cannot make amendments. The question is to follow the process as highlighted in our rules. Through notice, maybe at the third reading or second reading, you can always, but what we have done today, this is a report, presentation of reports. And after presenting the report, the members raised questions. And the chairman has been able to, answer them adequately. So we don't have reason to doubt the chairman if all we have said are going to be accommodated in the, what is it called? In the third reading. So I don't know why you are afraid of what will happen at the third reading. And if it doesn't accommodate our words we have suggested, we still have the power to, to step it down and ask the chairman to accommodate whatever. Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to observe that what has happened with respect to the report is conventional. It's conventional because this will not be the first time that we adopt recommendations of a committee as a session of the House subject to amendments being made. And Mr. Speaker, I think we subject it based on presumption of regularity that the affected chairman will do the needful. It's a practice of the Assembly that we have used very frequently and we have not been disappointed. And like Mr. Speaker correctly pointed out, I am of the opinion that when during third reading, the amendments so made are not taken care of in what is presented, of course, it is enough to officiate the third reading of the process and step it down. It's a conditional thing that we have been using and we have not been disappointed by any committee. So there is presumption that it will be done. It's a conventional thing, Mr. Speaker. And I think we have been using it very effectively. We should also presume that the committee concerned will be effective in making the necessary recommendation. It's not a strange thing, and we have not deviated from the normal procedure. That's what I just wish to observe, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Observation too, sir.
Honorable,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While appreciating your decision on Honorable Abiru's remark, with all apology to the chairman, Honorable Raymond, you even told him that he left out a lot of things, even the title that I said should accommodate the rights of the domestic staff. But to have a hybrid in such a manner that will not overwhelm it. Mr. Speaker, we just suggest, because I know he's not a young man, and he just finished an election, I know he must be very tired now, that probably all our observation should be given to him. So in the course of amending all those observations, he will do the needful without leaving anyone out. I reason with Honorable Abri because what he said is very fundamental. Our observations are very fundamental, and the man at the stage, obviously, he took over from somebody. He wasn't even at the center of the whole thing when it happened. So we appreciate you. But I think, Mr. Speaker, to support him and to give the speedy acceptance, maybe with your concurrence, sir, maybe every one of us that made an observation or observations today should make a request back to him and let him have it. So in the course of amending it, he will do the needful. Thank you, sir.
Honorable Kasumu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as a rider to what the majority leader had said, of course, we recognize the fact that it is conventional. It is something that has been a tradition for quite some time now. I must, however, note that the word amended that has been used at the end of the position that was taken, as rightly moved by Honorable, I think it was Gishao, has already taken care of all the necessary bits. So I want to believe that what is going to come back here to the floor of the House, taking the third reading, is going to be a corrected version based on recommendations and suggestions that have been pointed out. However, it is noteworthy to also support what Honorable Oluwa has said, that an outline of the mistakes or the errors should be passed on so that adequate corrections can be taken care of. But it should still be carried because it is a report and not necessarily a motion that should be stepped down. Thank you.
Honorable Joshua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Permits me to commend Honorable Brian Moore on a job well done. A lot of the questions that were asked were properly answered, and I also took note of some of those ones, maybe one or two, and I believe Mr. Speaker actually even highlighted them and gave appropriate answers to them. I also want to say that, you know, it's always been this practice that when we amend orally on the floor of the House, we take note of the amendment, and when we move the motion, we say as amended, and we follow through. Mr. Speaker made a point on the business rules, where I also want Honorable Abdul not to be too worried about it, page 55, which talks about the third reading. And it is right that when a bill has...
Committed and third reading.
And third reading, yes. And it is right, Order 75-2 says when a bill has been ordered for third
Make
reading...
use of the mic, please.
Hello? Order 75-2 says when a bill has been ordered for third reading, any member who wishes to amend or delete any provisions contained in the bill or to introduce any fresh provision may give notice of his intention on the order for third reading being read to move.
I think
to
that's
move
enough.
is enough. So I just want to support what Mr. Speaker has said,
Thank
that
you very much.
there is still room, if all those things were not taken, to do that at the third reading. But I want to assure you that it will be taken care of and is well noted. Thank you.
Honorable Olulade, I don't think we need to go further.
Yes, I'm just concerned. I need to be screwed because in this matter, once a motion, we are talking about two issues here. A motion has been moved to adopt as a position of the House. Why do we have to come back again debating on it?
No, it's good. No, thank you. At least we need something like this to remind us what we have in our rules.
Because there was no counter motion on
Thank
that.
you, Honorable Olulade. Thank you. Yeah, Majority Leader next.
Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't know if I'm recognized to make a contribution as I earlier indicated, or to make my last motion for today.
Well, are you with us or you are...
Mr. Speaker, I am perfectly in line in the House. I raised indication to talk, to make contribution. I put on my light.
Concluded on the report, it has been adopted and it has been carried. So the next thing is to... No, before the calm, we will refer back.
Mr. Speaker, having accomplished the purpose for which the House dissolved to committee of the whole, may I humbly move that this House reverts to plenary. I so move.
Honorable Olulade.
I second the motion as moved.
All in favor say aye. Those against nay. The ayes have it. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, at the committee of the whole, the House took the report of the Committee on Judicial Human Rights and Public Petitions and LSHA on a bill for a law to provide for the registration of domestic staff service providers in Lagos State and for connected purposes. After the report was presented by the chairman of the committee, members took time to make observation in respect of the presentation. Suggestions were made, and at the end of it all, the report of the committee was
Adopted and as amended.
debated, and recommendations therein were adopted as recommendation of the House, subject to the various observations made. Thereafter, Mr. Speaker, there was issue as to whether the motion was properly moved or not, and the proposition so made was adopted. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say that that's what transpired at the committee of the whole.
Ta ló sọ pé àgbà lọ lẹ́ẹ̀kan? No, sit down, not you, Majority Leader. Honorable Council.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to defend and affirm that this is a true recap and a reflection of what happened and transpired at the Committee of the Whole.
Okay. Honorable Naim.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second the affirmation.
All in favor say ayes. Those against nay, the ayes have it. Thank you. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, since we have exhausted what was listed on the other paper as business of today, may I, with the approval of Mr. Speaker, move that this House adjourns till Tuesday, the 9th day of April at 10 o'clock. Mr. Speaker, I so move.
Honorable Akonde.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second the motion as moved.
Before the question is put, there will be a short meeting immediately after sitting. All in favor say ayes. Those against nay, the ayes have it. This House stands adjourned till Tuesday, 9th April 2019 at 10 a.m. prompt. I rise.